Our first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Anderson, do we have anyone who's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today?
Hi, students. So, hoy, hoy, mighty Troy. And if Miss Morrison's in the room, can you join your students for the pledge? And how perfect is that? Did you all know Miss Morrissey was going to be here? Oh, my. But see, she always watches her students, so she knew to be here just for you. All right, we're going to turn it over to Miss Morrissey and our Topeka High drum line.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sir.
Thank you all for leading us in that Pledge of Allegiance. We appreciate it. Next item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. There is a motion. Is there a second? All right, Mr. Tatum with a second. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. Ms. Lister, please. Thank you very much. All right, well, we're going to move on to the next item, which is school highlights. Dr. Anderson.
Well, this is the last full meeting and the evening for the school board for the year. Therefore, we're really moving these highlights to the superintendent's report, in which we'll give a school update and wrap up our year. So if I may, sir, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Munoz.
Sounds
We'll
good.
give an update at that time.
That's it. We'll do that then. All right. Next item is public communication. Ms. Lister, do we have any public communication for today? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to the agenda, we have disposition of business by consent. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move the board approve the items of business by consent as presented and authorize the board president or superintendent to sign the special project and purchasing contracts for and on behalf of the board.
Okay. Thank you very much. There is a motion. Is there a second? Okay. Second by Ms. Stewart Campbell. Any questions? All right. Seeing no questions on the motion, we're going to move to a vote. Ms. Lister. Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. All right, we're going to first start off with a video that's being prepared for you. And let me thank Mr. Gowan, who last week I said, man, the audio, and someone just texted and said, man, that audio is very good. Can I get the person who made that audio sound that great? Well, we already have it. to share in terms of school updates. We'd be here all night getting through all of the reports in the many different schools. And to think that it hasn't stopped there. Even this week, we've heard additional news about other items that we're going to add to that. So we're going to post that right before the holiday break. But if with that update, the main thing at the very end was about schools that have shown such progress that they've been recognized by the state as really no longer being schools in improvement, and they're really schools of continued promise and possibility, showing what's possible in Topeka Public Schools. So those principals are here with us, either here in person or here online this evening. So Miss Morrissey, who is here in team, anyone from Topeka High, can you stand for just a moment? So they were exited from school improvement, and they will answer questions as you have them. You can be seated for just a moment. And then the remaining schools that are on with us, we have both at State Street as well with both Mrs. Roberts. And did you invite a team member on with you, Miss Roberts?
I did not, because we are actually having night one of our musical tonight. We have night one tonight and night two tomorrow night. And my assistant principal is doing piano lessons tonight with her boys, so she could not attend.
Oh, that's right. So it started at 6:30, the musical. All right. So at State Street, they exited school improvement. Ms. Wallace will share what does that mean and what were they on school improvement for? And then we're going to open it up really to the board. So congratulations to State Street. We are so excited as we got the news this week. Scott Dual Language also was exited from improvement, and all of these schools were able to show significant progress in 4 years. And so within that 4-year time frame, they also were exited. So both Dr. Mejia is online as well as Miss Gorsuch and team. Dr. Mejia, do you want to, and Miss Gorsuch and team, Dr. Mejia, I saw she waved, not sure who else is online. So Ms. Gorsuch, if you are on with other team members, would you like to share who's with you?
Just here with Dr. Mejia tonight. I'm very thankful and excited for this awesome news.
All right, thank you. We had a hard time hearing you there, so I'm not sure if it's on our end or your end, but you may want to come a little closer if they ask you questions. Again, congratulations to Scott Dual Language. The next school is Hope Street. And so Mr. Knoll always says, you can't beat Hope Street. And so that's how we came in, saying you can't beat Hope Street. That is our 4th school. And we, sometimes they say we save the best for last, in the sense that it's a school that was on improvement for multiple areas. And it's one of the most challenging schools. And to have shown that incredible progress in 4 years is almost unheard of. So congratulations, Hope Streeters. Okay, so very briefly, because we want to give you time just with the principals as we celebrate their success, we do have some photos that are going to come up on the screen as Mrs. Wallace shares what does improvement mean and why was each school on improvement now that they've been moved off of improvement. Ms. Wallace?
Yes, so to be on improvement means that KSDE has identified them as performing in the bottom 5% of district or schools across the state of Kansas in a particular area. So for example, Hope Street, it was their graduation rate, but it was also their subgroups for CAP in the area of free and reduced, Hispanic, and white students. And at Topeka High, it was for graduation rate, and then it was also for students with disabilities and their EL population. Both State Street and Scott were on improvement for their students with disabilities subgroup only.
So with that information, you see the photos there, we got a chance to go around the district today, get photos with various staff members. We're going to ask Ms. Morrissey and Ms. Riley to come on up to the microphone, and then the rest are on the screen. We'll turn it over to you, Mr. Munoz, so the board can ask questions and can learn a little bit about how our principals moved off of achievement. Here's the amazing thing we all talk about. All of them were there over the course of the 4 years, and most of their staffs were there over the course of the 4 years. Either they were an assistant principal or the principal. So the current principals were the APs over this 4-year time frame. So it's really been quite the just a tremendous feeling to have reached this as a team. So, Mr. Munoz.
Thank you so much. So tell us a little bit about the work that's involved in moving a school forward. We'd love to hear more about that journey for you all.
That's an open-ended, difficult question. Sorry, that's a tough one because it is so many things and it takes the work of everybody. And that's not just the teachers in the trenches because they do the day-to-day toughest work, but it is partners that we have in our schools. We've added a lot of community partners that provide resources. It has been the expansion in our counseling and social work and ensuring that we have things students need from just basic daily needs to the food we've handed out that they have on weekends. I mean, we have done so many things that contribute to our students improving. But I think a lot of it, at least at our building, challenging paradigms, challenging age-old practices. And two things we've really hit hard are using restorative practices so that discipline is not punitive and it is actually holding kids more accountable in a way that we can reteach behavior. So that certainly is a huge part of the ability to teach. I think it helped us traverse COVID and also now recover from COVID. And we've also been challenging how we assign grades and what it means to actually be proficient at the high school level, because grading systems are very subjective. You go school to school, place to place, and they're very different. So we've begun using standards-based language. We aren't fully in standards-based grading, but we really focus on the standards that we have in our curriculum already and talking about what it means to be beginning, developing, proficient, advanced. And we started with 3 goals, and I think this has been huge, but we had 3 overarching goals in our grading practice when I got there that we all philosophically agreed with, but there's a challenge in how it's applied. The first one was that we wanted the grade at the end of the semester to show what a student knows at that point. So we wanted to quit failing kids in September for something they could now do, and that's always been the practice. The second thing is we wanted kids to have multiple opportunities to show it to us. And this wasn't just about failures, this was also about days. We wanted grades to reflect across the board what they know. And what we found along the way is that our highest students now retain better and they know the material better because of the things we're doing. It's not just about the student that was struggling, learning slowly, having time. And then the third part of that is we wanted to take job readiness skills out of a grade. We know they're important, but we didn't want a kid penalized for being late, being tardy, whatever it might be. And we found, I'm going on way too long, but the 2 places we were on improvement and what I'm proud of is that the time and what they know at the end of the semester showed up massively for ELL students and for our SPED students who simply learn slower because of barriers. So our average, the 2 years prior to me coming, our average EL graduation rate was 58%, a little below. It is now 97.5. And the average for our SPED kids was 60%. It is now 95%. So it really shows that when you give students time and they don't have to be graded on something tomorrow, that they just learned that you can have a real impact. So all those things.
We've nominated, and she had one day to turn it in. Yesterday, I nominated before we knew about this, I nominated Mrs. Morrissey. I nominated her to be the speaker at the National Association for Secondary School Principals. We won't know for 3 months who they'll select, but as a breakout session, I truly believe that people across the country can learn from how do you take a school as large with 2,000 students with a lot of diversity, with all these subgroups, and show progress over time and change culture. So, and I suggested that she, look at her instructional coach, who's now her assistant principal. So both of them are registered to attend that conference, the National Association for Secondary School Principals. They turned in the proposal, and we'll keep you posted if they end up speaking. And even if they're not speaking, they will be attending at the conference overall. So we're excited about that. As you continue to ask questions, and I'll just kind of ask different principals to kind of pipe on in.
Sure.
Do you mind if an elementary speaks to that question as well?
That'd be great.
If we could, Mrs. Gorsuch and Dr. Mejia. Dr. Mejia, can you start? And Ms. Gorsuch, can you add?
Absolutely. Good evening. First and foremost, I have to say that this is team work. When I started there 4 years ago, I came up with the motto of "As a team, we beam," and that has carried us through. And everybody, pulling their weight and being committed to educating our kids. Mrs. Morrissey mentioned mental health, et cetera. So we had a focus, a clear vision of where we wanted to go and still have it. But it's educating the whole child. What does this child need academically? What does this child need social emotionally? and providing those supports, collaborating with teachers, setting benchmarks and, calibrating to make sure that our path is where we need it to go. I'm incredibly proud of the team. I couldn't have done it without Mrs. Gorsuch, and we both together, we couldn't have done it without our staff. Being a dual language school is also a great opportunity for us to tailor learning to our kids, and providing them instruction in their native language is a huge advantage that we have, and we embrace it. And that has also supported our students in special education and all students to move forward based on what they are familiar with, and building upon that. The last thing I want to say is creating systems that are, transferable from, whoever's there, and refining them with time and based on experiences and data. Ms. Gorsuch?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, perfect.
Good. So I would like to second what Dr. Mejia said and what Mrs. Morrissey said. Is definitely a team effort, and just have to shout out our teachers at Scott Dual Language Magnet. I just have to say, they are the best teachers I've ever met and ever seen. They're fantastic. They put their heart, soul, mind, time, effort, everything into making sure our students have the best education possible. So the big shout out goes to them first and foremost, but also to our students and our families as well. They're rock stars as well. We have fantastic students and parents who are there supporting their kids. And so the students are the ones who've really done the hard work to help move, just to improve their scores, to do better in their classes, and to demonstrate higher levels of mastery. And I'll speak a little more specifically to some of the systems that we have used to get off of improvement, because I think that this is a great honor, and I'd love to see all of our colleagues and all Topeka schools off of improvement. And so one of the systems that really helped us at Scott was the root cause analysis process of really diving into data and just asking over and over, why is this the case? Why is it? And from that process of looking at why are students in special education not performing at the same levels that our gen ed students are not growing at those same levels compared to the state or also to gen ed peers, we were able to come up with really concrete reasons and causes and focus our school improvement efforts in those areas, and just have a very close eye on data, both on the school level and the student level, and teachers. Like Mrs. Morrissey said, it's a loaded question, and it's not an easy thing. It's a complex system, but using processes like root cause analysis and the support from the district and providing us with really strong training for our leadership and these processes, I think has been crucial in helping us as leaders guide our school off improvement.
Thank you. We'll turn it back over to the board. You should know that all the schools are doing a root cause analysis, and what that means is really asking, what's your why? I mean, that's basically what that is. Why is this happening, and why is that? Every school across the district, speaking back to systems, are all doing that as well.
Other questions from board members about?
Well, and the question was, what were the whys? But we can turn it over to Mr. Knoll and Can't Beat Hope Street. When you think about your root cause analysis and why, when you were in improvement, why students were challenged and how you moved out of all those subgroups, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. First of all, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us on. We're super proud of our entire staff and our students and the progress that we've been able to make. And, it really focuses on, in my opinion, two things, and that's looking at every student as an individual and meeting them where they're at, and then using your school improvement plan and the goals that you've set in place to kind of guide that process and move students along and help them progress. And it really is every single staff member that I'd like to thank for their dedication, from teachers, social workers, media center, food service, custodial. It is everybody. It is truly a team effort. If somebody's not in school, a staff member notices, and a staff member will reach out to that student. If a student is feeling down or having a tough day, somebody will pick that student up And that's what it's really all about.
Thank you, Mr. Knoll.
Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Bowley.
Who all is involved in the root cause analysis? Is it just the leadership team? Is it all the teachers, staff? What does that actually look like when you do that?
Would you mind if I ask State Street to start off and then Ms. Morrissey to pick up from there? So Mrs. Roberts, can you share who's involved in the root cause analysis? What does that look like for you?
Yep, absolutely. Good evening. And so we actually met as a building leadership team and just came together in that small knit group to dive in and really begin a thorough analysis of our data in order to identify what trends and patterns we were seeing. And so through that analysis, we continue to ask why and continue to drill down and continue to try to find the root cause for why our students may not be making as much progress as we would like to see. And so we really came away from some of those meetings having great discussions. And one of my push as a leader is, so what's our next action step leaving this space tonight? Because I never want a meeting to be wasted time of just discussion and, okay, we're just going to have a discussion, walk away and not really have a plan. And so we did come up with solid action steps specifically at State Street for our next steps that did involve the teachers. And so one of those specific steps involved our instructional coach and our building sub that we have. And so having the opportunity for the building sub to cover classrooms to relieve our teachers in order for our instructional coach to work more closely with the teachers and help provide more guidance around raising rigor in our classrooms. So that's just one example of how it starts with a small team, the action steps that we put into place and how it then begins to bleed out to our staff and then even on more so to our students.
Thank you, Ms. Morrissey. The building sub is a concept that started about 2 or 3 years ago. That's not something that we necessarily can always have. You can't always just hire 30 extra people and leave them there. But because of COVID, that was one of the areas that I asked Mr. Robbins to, allow us to just do. So we were guaranteed to have one person there, not knowing when someone was going to be ill. And so after COVID concluded, since we knew we still had a teacher shortage and weren't really sure what the pandemic would do this year, Mr. Robbins was gracious to be able to find a way to allow us to still hire 30 extra people using some of the grant dollars that we have. But there'll be some opportunities to try to problem solve that in the future because that is not, we don't normally hire extra people in addition to our regular subs. So it has been quite beneficial. Ms. Morrissey, do you want to speak to that? Who's on your root cause analysis team?
I would agree with Ms. Roberts. The most recent activity, it was our building leadership team, but we already knew from the activities we do. And over the course of really 6 years, we have constantly asked teachers to determine why each student has an app. So we go into the why. A lot of it's about task completion. So we revisited what we do and what's graded and what homework is. So I think it's a combination of the activity itself, which is the leadership team, but it's also the feedback we get in collaboration and through other activities from our staff who know specifically each student and why they do it. I'd also say that the data consults that we do, not the district level, although that has certainly driven it, but at the building level, we do weekly consults and our divisions know their kids well. I joked a few weeks ago that they come in and try to catch us up and they really do know every single kid. That's tough in a large building. So I think it's a combination of all those things. And oh, don't ever take my building sub away because it's amazing to have that. He's a former referee I yelled at. He works for us. He's great.
Any other questions? One more, okay. Yes. Well, let's go with Dr. Bomrick down here and then Ms.
Will
Bowley.
the smaller class size help the teachers considerably intensify the learning and jump from educational plan to another? Like private schools, isn't that their main advantage? They have smaller classes.
You could hear online with smaller class size. My apologies, my microphone was off. You may not have heard in the microphone with smaller class sizes help. And Dr. Bombrick was sharing private schools often have smaller class sizes. And do you feel that that would be advantageous? Do you want to point that to an elementary and to a secondary? Are you okay with me asking an elementary to speak to that? Ms. Gorsuch, can you speak to the smaller class size? And then, well, we'll turn it over to you and then we'll turn it over to a high school.
Sure. So good evening again. So I would say that's a loaded question. I think good teaching for a reasonable amount of students is not going to have an impact. I think there's a lot of factors that go into play between the differences in private schools and public schools. Just a lot that we can't account for. I would say that most teachers would say that there is a sweet spot of a certain class size, but I also can tell you that I've seen amazing classes that are sitting around 28 that do a fantastic job where students are learning. So I think that we could really get into a great discussion concerning that question, but I'm not sure. I would wonder, do we have necessarily control over that factor? And one of the things I think has helped us get off improvement is really focusing in on the things that we have control over in the areas that we can improve and find success for our students. So I don't think I answered it 100%, but that would be my take.
Thank you. And we'll ask a secondary to speak to that. Ms. Wallace, you also mentioned the effect size. We implemented visible learning. It's a researcher, John Hattie, who also, that research was shared with the board maybe 2 or 3 years ago. We invited John Hattie here. He rarely is in the States. And then we invited other districts. Washburn Rural, Lawrence, they were able to benefit from our hosting of John Hattie. His research, which really shows how schools improve, he studies schools across the country that are high performing. Mrs. Wallace, can you speak in layman's terms about the class size?
Yes, so his research indicates that anything with a 0.4 or greater effect size accelerates learning. And in his research, class size has a 0.21 effect size. So essentially, it does not impact student learning.
And then as a secondary item to add to that, Mrs. Morrissey, do you have any items you would like to add? Or
She nailed it. All the research I've done over my entire career tells you that class size doesn't make a difference. I know it doesn't feel that way as a classroom teacher, but a good teacher has the strategies to teach well. And the class size by itself doesn't have as much of an impact as I know you might think.
And if it did, those one-room schoolhouses a long time ago, I don't know. You might know about one-room schoolhouses, Dr. Bumbrick. No, we would have been in trouble.
Dr. Anderson, I can probably add to that a little bit. I believe the greatest effect is, according to Hattie's research, is the collective efficacy, if I recall correctly, which is the ability of the staff to work together as a team to reach goals. And if you have a staff that's working together and they're all striving for the same thing, that's when success truly can happen.
Can't beat Hope Street. Now, no one could have said it as well as you can. And John Hattie would be proud hearing that quote. And so this idea of collective efficacy also incorporates visible learning walkthroughs. So someone mentioned Corwin walkthroughs. In fact, today, Scott was being walked through today. So we have outside teams that are visible learning teams to say, is learning visible? What are kids learning and how do you know? And really looking at the efficacy within the room. So collectively and individually in terms of great teaching.
Ms. Bowley, do you have one more question?
You were talking about giving students time to learn, and it changed the way you structure grading. Actually, evaluation, it sounds like more of what you're doing in your building is evaluation of students rather than giving them a set grade. Is this something we do all the way across our high schools, or is this something that Topeka High is put in place? And is this something that we need to look at in other high schools?
And we'll address kind of both of those. Ms. Wallace can speak to this. Standards-based grading is something that about 5-6 years ago, we at the elementary level, we introduced it. But standards in general, in terms of our curriculum really being realigned to standards. Not teaching you the test or a book but standards. What's the standard of what you need to know? And there are many different things that you can use to address that standard. And then really driving that conversation differently. So everyone is using the curriculum design map based on standards. And then the grading practices, Mrs. Morrissey really has forged ahead in another kind of way of really looking at standards. And part of that really was when she entered Topeka High. I mean, she gave some really great stats to our staff today. It was in a place where they really needed to rethink what they were doing and how they were doing it in a much different place than some of the other schools. As I turn it over to Mrs. Morrissey, Mrs. Wallace, did you want to speak to standards and grading practices? Because grading practices is talked about at all the schools in different ways.
Yes, so the standards-based grading is daily practice at elementary school. In fact, their report card has the standards clustered, or so standard statements, and all of their assignments in their grade book in Tyler feed to a specific standard, which really allows them to determine mastery of standard pretty easily when they look at various assignments from students that are assigned to those standards. That is standards-based grading is a process at secondary. It's not something that they have done very much of, except at Topeka High. And so that's, we started at elementary, and the intent is to gradually move upwards.
And we are not doing full standards-based grading. That's why I said we're using the standard-based grading principles, which is a 4-point scale, but we're still working on a 100-point scale. So it's not purely there. But what we have done is looked at things like flooring so that it's not a 60% failure and then 10% passing. We've looked at how we make it match things like the CAP, which is 4 areas, you get 4. So most of the things, our teacher evaluation instrument is 4 ratings, and talking about why a 4 rating is so much more important than using the 100-point scale, which frankly was designed just to make it easier. It's easier to grade something 100%. So it's been teaching to the standards, which our curriculum has had standards in it ever since I've been in the district. We've had excellent curriculum, and the standards are well defined. And knowing what it is we want students to know, what is just exposure that we want kids to try, and then really giving them time to learn. As a math teacher, I used to give you an assignment. I grade it tomorrow and put a grade in a grade book, and kids dodge it because they can't learn it quickly if they're not really good at math and it's not natural for them. So by giving them time, I hope, I don't hear kids say anymore, I can't do math, I can't do whatever it is, because they realize they just take a little longer to process it. And once they have success, then that helps a ton. The other thing that I think we've done, which again, it's not standards-based grading, but we have really talked about how we assess kids and what's important to actually go in a grade book, and that feedback is different than grading. I can give a student good feedback without judging the fact that they know it yet or not, which gives them time in a non-judgmental, safe way to fail. And it is through our failures that we truly learn and get better, process the information.
And thank you for sharing that. I think it may have been Ms. Schmidt, but it was someone maybe a couple weeks ago that was asking about grading and flooring grades. And that really speaks to what Ms. Morrissey is talking about on the secondary end, when, it's still an F, and whether it's a 20 or 50 or 40, how much of an F do you need to give them to tell them it's an F? So really, again, that's a change in mindset in terms of helping young people improve. And what we see is it's working district-wide.
And there are the high schools that are talking about flooring, and COVID really made us step back as staff across the district and look at what was important and how we helped assess kids in a different way.
Any other questions? We do have, but it will be under discussion, the calendar to share with you that is proposed for next year. But are there any other questions for any of our school administrators?
Anything else? Yes, Ms. Stewart Campbell.
I just want to say congratulations and felicidades to Scott and to all the schools that also have Spanish speakers. That's it. The questions I had, you already answered. So congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you all very much for all of your work.
And I know Ms. Roberts wanted to tell you when her play was again. I know we were there earlier. Ms. Roberts, what time is that play tomorrow?
It is at 6:30 p.m. Our doors open at 6 o'clock. It's called The High Seas, and you will be blown away. And we told them to break a peg leg today.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Sawyer is her partner in crime, who is now a principal in Independence, but he recruited her before he left. So the two of them together led the school through this progress, and we informed him as well. So we want to again congratulate you, Ms. Roberts, and the full team that helped make this happen. Thank you. Those are all of our updates overall. I think the montage really covered a lot of other items. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Munoz, and then we'll pick back up with the calendar discussions.
Thank you so much. Okay, so next item on our agenda discussion is 20.1, which is the 23-24 academic calendar. Ms. Wallace, would you like to share with us some about this?
Yes, we had 3 calendars that we submitted or surveyed all staff. And calendar A, the one that was attached to the board agenda, actually came in with 40.
Is your microphone still on, Ms. Wallace?
It is.
Can you repeat the percentages?
So yes, calendar A had 43.3% of the vote. Calendar B, 30.4%. Calendar C, 26%.
And can you share the difference between the calendars?
Yes. So calendar A starts quite a bit earlier with teachers reporting back on August 1st. It has a full week off at Thanksgiving, 11 days at Christmas or winter break. It has a day off between spring break and the end of the school year in April. And all 3 calendars get out before Memorial Day. So the calendar committee works under some parameters or guidelines. And one of the parameters is that teachers would like to be out before Memorial Day. They'd like to have 2 weeks at the winter break and a full week at spring break. So those are some of the parameters that we look at. So calendar 2 had us starting on the 3rd, teachers returning. It had a traditional Thanksgiving break. And then it also had a day off in April between spring break and the end of the year. And then calendar C started.
And I'm going to interrupt for just a minute. We only have the calendar A that's up. We don't have calendar B and C up, although perhaps it's uploaded on the board docs for the board to see that.
No, typically we've uploaded the one that we're
recommending. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll leave it to you to share what the other calendar differences were that people didn't overwhelmingly vote for.
Okay. So, and then calendar C started a week later or a little more than a week later at August 9th. It had the traditional 3 days off at Thanksgiving. It had a 2 weeks off at winter break. It did not have a day off between spring break and the end of the school year. And so those are really the big differences between the 3 calendars.
Here's what we're excited about with calendar A. We were excited to see that overwhelmingly classified and certified staff both agree with calendar A. Sometimes you have one group that wants hourly staff wants one thing, and that wasn't the case here because we also explained that with that 1 week off where hourly staff wouldn't always, they may have issues with not being paid during that week. By allowing hourly staff to move around some other days. For example, the very last day could be with students. When the students leave, the hourly paraprofessionals and some of those staff members could also conclude, and they can start often they have summer jobs, summer opportunities. The other thing is when we come back, convocation is really the big comeback day. There's really no need to have some of our hourly staff come back a day early. But by moving those days to that Thanksgiving week, they could be paid during that same time and have that week off. We would then be the only district in Shawnee County as a recruitment measure, which is one of the reasons I asked Ms. Wallace to add that as a 3rd calendar to be looked at. So they had 2 calendars already. That 3rd calendar, I just wanted to get feedback on that 1 week off. Would that cause people to look at that differently if we made those other changes? The closest district to us outside of the county would be Lawrence, based on what we know of next year's calendars from other places around us or what their current calendars are. So we believe it may also be a recruitment tool to be able to have those spaces of breaks. Are there questions for Ms. Wallace about the calendar? I could have guessed you were going to ask a question, Dr. Bonebrake.
Mr. Tatum, or Dr. Bonebrake, let's go.
Thank you. It's my understanding that we are legislatively required to have students in school 180 days. But 19 of those days are assigned to professional development, so they're only in the seats 161 days. Am I wrong?
Yes. So.
Okay.
Well, for our calendar and for our negotiated agreement, we have 173.5 instructional days. We have 5 days of teacher planning and prep, and then we have 7.5 days of professional development for a total of 190 days that teachers are on duty.
But not that students have their seats in the seats,
Correct, but they're in their seats 173.5 days,
not 180.
not 180. A few years ago, we added minutes to our day. So previously, we were out at 3:30 now at elementary. Now they're out at 3:40. We added 10 or 15 minutes on the front end or back end of middle school and high school calendars as well, or days, to give us those additional minutes.
So to that point, Dr. Kip, if you're online, and it looks like you are, in terms of minutes, we count minutes rather than days. Dr. Kip, so, how many minutes are we required to have, and how many minutes are student seats? That's really what you want to know. In school.
Yes, the statute allows boards to choose either to count days or minutes. And for over a decade, I believe we've counted the minutes. It's 1,160 minutes for the school year for each kid. 1116, that's right. So really how you divvy that up, like Ms. Wallace's point, we may only have 173 days, but usually our minutes are way over that 1116 requirement.
Right. Yes, Mr. Tatum.
So not being extremely knowledgeable about this process, I've always been fairly curious as to how it unfolds. It sounds like district administration creates one or more calendar options, and then teachers vote and ratify which ones they would like to go with. Is that
Yes,
somewhere in the neighborhood?
Well, when I started, it was weeks or maybe months long initially, but certainly a very long, tedious process. Seemed too long for us. So we changed that about, was it 5 years ago? Yeah, it was about 5 years ago. And at the time, the then union president, as well as myself, I just asked if they make a calendar, we make a calendar, take the two calendars to the calendar committee to see, how might they tweak the two calendars to get to the two calendars that they like. And that's where the conversation is, the springboard, as opposed to starting from scratch and having conversation and building the calendar over time. That would take a very long time. So that process to some degree looks like that. Ms. Wallace can step you through with that context of the change 5 years ago. It really takes 1 or 2 meetings, maybe 3. It doesn't take months or to get to a calendar, which is why we can also bring that to you in advance. So we know next year as a recruitment tool, what does the year look like? That's just been for us a really nice change. I also asked Ms. Wallace to lead that, because for teaching and learning, it's really nice for a teaching and learning person to really lead that calendar committee rather than, and we've always had a board member or 2 on there. Ms. Boley is the board member on the calendar committee. Ms. Wallace, I'll turn it over to you to speak to that. And then if I may, offer it to Ms. Boley to add any items as the board member representative on that committee.
Yes, so it's a joint effort between NEA Topeka and the district. And so we bring calendars to that first meeting. And from there, we start out by looking and reminding everyone of the parameters and adding to or taking away from the parameters that they desire. NEA provides or invites 5 to 6 teachers to be on that committee. And then 2 years ago, we added classified staff. So we have 2 classified staff members. We usually have a couple of parents that join that committee as well. And then we look at the different calendars that are brought to the table. We'll look at the pros and cons of each. We may go away and come back with some modifications based on the conversation to a second meeting. And then actually the last several years, it's been 2 meetings. And then we bring a calendar to the teachers and the classified staff to vote on.
Okay. So my question, I've actually been asked about the timing of the school year starting. I know when I was I remember in high school not going back to school for the upcoming year until after Labor Day. And it seems like that has just crept up earlier and earlier and earlier each year. Is there a particular rationale behind that?
Ms. Wallace?
Well, I think what Dr. Bonebrake said is correct.
And I didn't hear what
it's
Dr.
air
Bonebrake-
conditioning. Previously, when I started, we also didn't really start back until after Labor Day because our schools weren't air conditioned. But it also allows then teachers to get out before that Memorial Day and have some time off before we start summer programs.
Okay.
So in order to get in the minutes that we need and the days, you would have to start it at a certain time earlier and then to get out at that time.
I
To
wondered.
get all the minutes and days that you need in.
Okay. Is that has those, I take it those standards have changed over time?
In terms of the minutes and
Right,
days that you
right,
need to get
right.
in, Ms. Wallace? Yes.
They have changed over time, but they've been pretty consistent for the last probably 15 to 20 years.
Really? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
That's a good question. Any other questions about this? This is a discussion item. We are not voting on it today. Is that correct? Okay.
So our next step will be to bring this back to you and have it under consent and ask for approval unless you have other questions or thoughts. I think staff will be pretty excited. Many of our staff members will be pretty excited about having that 1 week off. But coming in earlier and having some other things that would be in place because many teachers come in earlier, honestly, before August 3rd anyway. So the first isn't as much of an issue as one would think.
All right. Thank you all very much. We'll revisit this item and put that to a vote in the future. Next item on our agenda is action items. And we talked about this last time. This is approval of high school course changes. Were there any questions? Well, it's actually any motion on this action item.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the high school course changes as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second? All right, second with Mr. Tatum. Now, are there any questions about this before we put to a vote? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. Ms. Lister.
All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is board member comments. We'll start with Dr. Bonebrake. All right. Dr. Schumacher.
That's great. I was looking at the Hattie effect. 0.4 being humor 0.04. So I feel bad. Thought I had more going for me. Technology committee met this week. We talked about digital equity. It's kind of a standing item that we discussed. We talked a little bit about the 2 kind of simultaneous migrations that'll be going on, the change from terms to Tyler Munis and kind of the systems that are involved with that. And then also the upcoming change from Tyler Sys to Synergy and just some of the education. And then Ms. Stewart Campbell brought up a good point. We talked a little bit about, not only the education of the staff and what's needed there, but also the kind of education of the parents, just as Mr. Tatum had brought up. the previous board meeting as far as changing from Power School to Tyler to now to Synergy. So we will continue to move on that. I think those were kind of the big things. We talked about cybersecurity some more, but I will not give away all our secrets. And an open board meeting. That's all I have.
Yeah, there you go.
0.04.
All right, Mr. Tatum.
So I didn't have much. I ran across an article today that I wanted to just kind of elevate. It's I think more of a cautionary tale than anything else. Came by way of the Washington Examiner, and the name of the article is Fairfax Schools Failed to Provide Proper Education to Students with Disabilities, Authorities Say. And essentially what happened was during the period of remote instruction, during the COVID shutdown between March 2020 and the spring of 2021, Fairfax County, Virginia, their public schools did not provide a free, appropriate public education to students with disabilities, and that was in violation of federal law. In an effort to ensure continued support for students during an unprecedented time, the school district implemented temporary learning plans for all students with IEPs or individual educational plans in April of 2020. The department says that those temporary plans by the school district included informing staff that if a student did not receive a free appropriate education during the period of remote instruction, then the district did not have to provide remedial learning. The district also reduced and placed limits on services and special education instruction provided to students with disabilities based on considerations other than the student's individual educational needs. So just a bit of I think a cautionary tale again. I haven't heard of such issues occurring within our own district. I think we probably were more diligent and mindful about how we supported students with disabilities during those times. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Anderson. But I thought that was interesting to highlight, just for our knowledge and awareness, so that we can be sure moving forward that as a district, we avoid those kinds of highly publicized pitfalls. And that's really all that I have.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Schmidt.
This week at my work, we kicked off our United Way campaign. And as part of that, it's always fun to hear them highlight Topeka Public Schools going-ons. So they talked about Pine Ridge Prep quite a bit, which is near and dear to my heart, as it is over in my neighborhood. And we got to hear Miss V talk for parents as teachers. And, you know, it was just a great reminder and a great example of the energy and passion that our staff have for their jobs and their students. And I think when she got done, that, you know, most of the corporation wanted to go participate in Parents as Schools, because she just has such an abundance of energy and is so excited about the work that she does. And that just came through in everything she said. So it's just a great reminder in a different setting to hear the good things that Topeka Public Schools is doing being highlighted.
Thanks. Ms. Stewart Campbell.
Yeah, a few things. So the few nights ago, I was at Topeka High for the, what's it called? Like Late Night in the Dungeon, right? To showcase the girls basketball, boys basketball, the beginning of the season. And it was very exciting. I had never been to that before. The drumline performed, the step team, you weren't kidding. When you told me about the step team, how they were like making a comeback, just wait. If you haven't seen Topeka High step team, they were awesome. Anyway, that was just very, very exciting. And it was a fundraising event. So I hope you raised lots of funds. And another thing I wanted to say about it is the girls, and perhaps you read about this in the news, but the girls were wearing like a red hand mark on their face. You saw this? Okay, yes. So, and I mentioned this at our last board meeting about the donation we received to raise awareness about disappeared and murdered Indigenous women. And so that was the purpose of the red hand mark. So, and also the girls on the team. And I think the coach as well also has a tribal affiliation. So, and that was very powerful. So anyway, so that I wanted to talk about that. I also remember a few board meetings ago, I was talking about how I would like for us to start an exchange program, thinking about our graduating our students to be citizens of the world and how we can do an exchange program, like become like a true exchange where one student goes to France and the French student comes here. Well, I just have an update about that. I know we're supposed to discuss this at a future board meeting, but I just wanted to share with everybody that I took the initiative to reach out to Washburn, because the more partners we have, the better, right? Because I've known the Washburn International House staff, faculty for a very long time. So I just felt comfortable. So I called Bailey Zhang, he's the director of international programs at Washburn. And I just told him the idea, and would Washburn be interested in possibly partnering with us on such an initiative? And the answer was yes. And then he encouraged me to reach out to the modern languages, the department chair, that's it, the department chair of modern languages. So I did. And the department chair of modern languages also is 100% on board with this idea. So I just wanted to share that Washburn's excited to partner with us. And last thing to say about this is we all discussed how, if the board wants to move in this direction, that we start small. We start very small, like with one country. And the chair of modern languages at Washburn, he's recommending we start with Paraguay. So thinking of Topeka Public Schools award-winning dual language program, start with Spanish, start with high school. I'm glad our Miss Morrissey and Miss Riley are here. Start with Topeka High, start with, well, it could be any of our high schools, but because we have our dual language program in Spanish, and to start with Paraguay is his recommendation because of the long-lasting partnership that Kansas already has with Paraguay, which a lot of people don't know about this partnership, but it's been around since the 1960s. The Partners of the Americas, Kansas and Paraguay, partnered together. This was started under JFK, so early 60s is how long this program's been around. So anyway, I wanted to say that. And last thing, I'll be at Topeka High tomorrow, because talking about civic engagement, Topeka High has a history teacher, who teaches his students the importance of civic engagement, being informed voters. And so I'm invited tomorrow to go speak to this class about the importance of voting and what it means to be an elected official. And I think Mr. Munoz already, I think you might have gone this week as well. Okay. Anyway, and that's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Ms. Boley.
I kind of felt like a mini Dr. Anderson today, running from school buildings to the state building, back to school buildings, and now to the board meeting. And I appreciate everything you do every day. I had a hard time keeping up with all of it and being on time. So I'm impressed. I also, when I went through our agenda, I noticed that we had listed our cooperating teachers on our agenda today to approve some extra pay for them. It's not very much, but it's a little bit of an addendum type pay. And I just wanted to thank these cooperating teachers, because they spend so much time mentoring our newer professional teachers coming in. And it's time way above their own time in the classroom. They also extend that time to these future teachers for us. And so I just really want to thank them because I understand how much work that is to help them through this process. And we really appreciate them training our future teachers. What success our staff is having as we just keep growing and doing more and more. I just want to thank all of our staff for just taking that leap of faith and going for it and helping our students. I know it's so much work, but they do it, and then they realize how much of a difference they are truly making every day in students' lives. So thank you. Also, Advisors Excel really reached out to our schools, and every school found families that could maybe use some Christmas assistance and recommended students' names, and they all got to go shopping with Miss Claus and her elves and be able to pick out presents for themselves. And if I've been on situations like this, I know they probably also picked out presents for their family. And Advisors Excel made some dreams come true. So want to really thank them for making a Christmas a better experience for those young people. And as we get to this point, I want to thank our board members. Your dedication to our board and seeing the success and the support that we want to give our staff and our leadership teams. Thank you for putting in your time and effort, and we'll be moving into the second part of the year. So here we go.
All right, I'll just follow up with just a couple of brief things. Yes, I did speak at Topeka High with Mr. Reilly's government class. And when I asked him, how much do you think we all get paid? You know, these big bucks, and they had some pretty big numbers that they threw out there. And so I wrote in the very big numbers what we made, and they were surprised. And so, but they're learning about local government where you have lots of individuals who really care about their community to put forth effort. And so not just here and on our school board, but in lots of places in our local here in our community. Let's take a look. If you haven't had a chance, take a look at this. Lots of schools have been working really hard, whether they're theater departments, music departments, and their students have been practicing their instruments. In my house, I've listened to the 4 songs a number of times. She's there, she's ready, and next week on I believe on Tuesday or Thursday, she'll have her presentation at her local. So if you are looking for something to do on a particular evening, this calendar will give you a notice of lots of our schools who'd love to have us. So I'd encourage you to look that up. And one other thing is next week, I believe on Wednesday, I'd have to take a look. There's a winter party at Quinton Heights for the English language program. And so 5:30 to 7:30, just down the street here. If you're interested, contact Anita Curry, let her know about that. I'm going to be juggling my daughter's music program and this EL program. But if I see you all there, that'd be a great thing. Other than that, I think, I do want to recognize Southwest Publishing, which made a donation to Ross Elementary, as well as First United Methodist, who made a donation to State Street Elementary. So again, thank you to those partners that are supporting our students, want to see them successful. I think we all come out ahead with that effort. So with that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we adjourn.
All right, the motion has been made. All in favor? All right. Okay, all in favor, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.